Hey everyone, I'm Coach Chippys and I've been a professional top laner or head coach for the past 8 years. During this time I've reached Worlds and MSI multiple times. Now I'm a full-time coach with a ton of passion towards helping players unlock their potential and climb to their dream rank. Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to be analysing the 2024 preseason changes, but from a top laner's perspective. I'm going to be going through each change and analysing how exactly that's going to impact us as top laners, and I'm not going to read everything out, word by word. I'm just going to give you a TLDR of what the change is and how it's going to impact you as a top laner for the next season. Now, for the first change, you're going to be adding a new neutral monster instead of Herald pre-14 minutes, and these grubby boys, essentially, when you kill them, your whole team is going to get a buff that gives you bonus damage to structures. And I think this is a really good change for top lane, because in current league, you can't really be a part of many teamfights and skirmishes as top lane pre 8 minutes. You can't really pull up to a dragon fight because your lane opponent's going to get 2 plates, so most of the time you can only fight around Herald, which is 8 minutes into the game, where you've probably played a lot of games where the game's not decided by then, but it feels like your team's very far behind before 8 minutes, but now you can have a huge impact in the game around 5 minutes if you're playing a strong champion and you're winning lane. You can force skirmishes around these grubs and get a AoE buff for your team that's going to help them get plates in their lane, where of course if your bot lane, for example, is losing and you get a couple of these grubs, they're not going to be touching tower anyway, so it's not overpowered, but the enemy jungle and mid especially is going to feel pressured to fight around these, and even the support might come up, so you're going to be more involved in the game as a top laner. So for top lane, champions that are very strong early, this is around 5 minutes by the way, so for top lane, if you kill the 5-minute normal wave, which will arrive in your lane around 5 minutes, 5:05. If you get every single bit of XP before that point, you're going to be level 6. At around 5:10, 5:20, you'll be level 6. So champions that spike at that timer are going to be really strong. Champs like Renekton, for example, are going to feel really useful because you can fight around and force these fights, where in the past you sort of had to just play your lane until Herald spawns. So I think this is a really strong change for top lane, and it's going to prioritize picking a champion that's very strong in early skirmishes. Now, as for the new Herald, you can basically just ride it like a Sarn ulti, not much changing there, it's still a strong objective to play for. Void camps, they just look different, but something really interesting is that at 20 minutes, once Baron spawned, the red and blue buff get replaced by these stronger versions, and if you break them, if you kill them, sorry, your whole team is going to get the buff. So this is going to be really strong for fighting around these neutrals, where in the past, let's say Dragon and Baron 4 minutes off spawning, there's no real way to force a fight on your opponent, but if you're in their jungle playing for these camps on spawn, the upgraded version of them, it's going to have a huge benefit, where if you fully control a jungle just to take the enemy's blue buff at 20 minutes, it's not that impactful, but an AoE blue buff that you get for your whole team, or a red buff, very powerful, so I really like that change. There's going to be a lot more action, especially past 20 minutes, so you don't have to wait for, the next Baron or the next Dragon. And as for the new crab, basically it's just a, crab on steroids, where if you kill it, it's going to give a AoE Scrying Bloom, reveal all the wards, reveal all the enemies, so it's not like as impactful as these upgraded buffs in my opinion, but it's still something to keep in mind. There will be some situations where Baron is up, both teams have a good Baron, you do want to be fighting around this crab and securing it, but like I said before, it's not as impactful as the buff changes, and the Herald is just about the same. As for the Baron, there are 3 variations of them, and each of them have a different terrain that they spawn and different special attacks. Now, this doesn't really change anything for you because you still want to be fighting around Baron. Of course, if you get Baron, you're probably going to be in a good position to win the game, or at least break a lot of structures. So the amount of damage the Baron does, the different attacks he has, it only changes how the team fight breaks out, not really top lane specifically. Now, for the terrain changes, this one is actually interesting because they've tried to make it so that top lane is pretty equal on each side of the map, where in previous seasons, well, current league, it's very easy to get ganked on red side compared to blue, because if you're on blue side, you have this huge wall. It's pretty hard for most junglers, except for Rek'Sai, Broken Champion, to clear this wall and gank you from behind. So most of the time, you only have this to worry about, right? This river, unless you're pushing under their tower. Now they've tried to make it pretty equal. However, the problem with this is that in the past, top lane was, I wouldn't say balanced, but red side you had the counter pick, right? You can pick on 5, you can get a really good matchup, but you're going to be more gankable. So even though you're in the good matchup, you can get ganked from the try, you could have got ganked from river. There's a lot of angles where you can get ganked from in your winning matchup, so it felt more balanced. But now you're going to get counter pick on red side, and it's going to be harder for you to get ganked. So I feel like this makes counter pick and top lane more important. I'll skip some of the changes that doesn't really impact us top laners, like the mid lane terrain or support items, wasted time, but we'll move on to the mage items, where most of these, of course, are for mages, especially malignants, where if you hit an enemy champion with your ultimate, it's going to burn the ground beneath them. So there's no real top laner that's going to use this very well, where you might be thinking a champ like Rumble could use it, of course very ulti reliant, but if you see 600 mana, Rumble doesn't really want to be building that. We'll move on to Caster's Companion, where you'll be storing up shots as you walk around, and if you hit somebody with a spell, it's going to do a damage with those shots, right? You can stack up to 6 of them. It's basically like Luden's Echo, I guess, with a bit of extra swag to it. But for the most part, this is also an item you won't be building on top lane unless you're playing control mages. Lyssandra's in a pretty good spot right now, but even then you wouldn't build this item on her. And then we move on to Storm Surge. So we get into the items where top laners are going to benefit a lot. And this is the main one in my opinion, where if you deal 35% of a champion's max HP, you're going to get a huge burst of movement speed. And then after a couple of seconds, it's going to do a ton of damage to them. Basically to simplify it, and this item is going to be extremely powerful on a champion like Vladimir. Of course, uses movement speed very well, uses magic pen and AP really well, and of course the movement speed, the extra damage, everything you could want in an item. It's going to be great on Vlad, which I'm really looking forward to because he is quite terrible this year, and even a champion like Rumble could use this quite well, even Kennen. So I'm really looking forward to this item. It sounds like a ton of fun for those champions. And then we move down to Haunting Guys. Now, everyone knows what Haunting Guys is in the past. Basically, each second in combat, the damage stacks up. So this item and the one that it builds into later on makes me feel like Mordekaiser is going to be coming back as well, which is great because he's had a bad year as well. So I'm really happy to see these changes and give champions that were quite bad for the past 2 years, get some opportunity to shine again. We'll move down to Crypto Bloom. Now, this item, 30% Magic Pen, 15 Haste, quite a lot of Magic Pen. And if you get to take down an enemy champion, you're going to create a healing Nova at their location. So basically Fiora ulti, the AP version, and I don't really see any top lane champ you'd be building this on. Maybe if you're not playing too well on an AP top, you want this to help your team out. But for the most part, I would stay away from this unless it's overpowered. We'll never know until the items release. They're constantly changing the stats on all of them. But in terms of a top laner's perspective, this is not an item you want to be building, right? You're going to be isolated in the side lane a lot of the time, and this item is not going to help you very much. And now we move down to Riftmaker. Now, Riftmaker is pretty similar to how it was before, just a little bit stronger in my opinion. And this item is going to be really good, especially the build path. You get Haunting Guys now. And this item, of course, still going to be great on a champion like Gwen. Still going to be good on Mordekaiser if you don't want to build the move speed one. So I like the new change to the build path as well, getting a Haunting Guys early instead of Leeching Lair, whatever it's called. It's going to feel really good. And then we have Liandry's Torment. So another option for mod. So he's going to have a great season where dealing damage with abilities causes the enemies to burn for 2% of their max HP for 3 seconds, right? Very similar to the old Liandry's, so this item is going to be really good at champions they want to be fighting for a long period of time, like, of course, Mordekaiser. So this item will be really good on him. Of course, it feels like he's definitely coming back. He has a ton of options as well. And then for the rest, it's pretty similar. Horizon Focus, don't really build that on top. And then we have the updated Seekers, where in the past, you could just buy a stopwatch, but now this is the new stopwatch. You have to commit 1600, you have to build AP, so you can only really build this on AP champs like Maud or Gwen, even Vladimir. So for top laners in general, it doesn't really change that much, except you can't go stopwatch anymore, but for AP tops, it's pretty similar. You just build this if you want it. And then for Shadow Flame, very similar as well. Cosmic Drive, the same. They're just making slight changes to all these items we already know about. But for the most part, the main items I'm looking forward to are these new, not even mythics, but fully completed items that are going to allow champions like Vlad and Mordekaiser a chance to shine again. Also, keep in mind they're completely removing mythic items. You're no longer locked into one key item. You can build whatever you want. So like we talked about before, all those choices you have for Maud or Vlad, you can build basically all of them if you want to. So it's going to be really good for champions that can benefit from a lot of these new items. Moving on to assassin items. Now, there are still some champs that can build lethality items, even though there's not a lot of assassins in top. So champions like Riven, champs like Aatrox, Jace, they can build items like this. But as for the first item, Voltaic Cyclosword, you're probably going to be staying away from it. And it's basically just static shift, but for assassins. So as you move, you stack up charges, and when you've got 100 stacks, you do 100 extra damage and slow them at the end. So this is best on champions like Talon, not really an item for top lane. And then we have the Profane Hydra. Now this item's quite interesting. It's basically Ravenous Hydra for assassins. And as for top lane, you already have insane wave clear on champs like Aatrox, champions like Jace. So you don't really need this, but on a champ like Riven, even though your wave clear is not bad, I could see this item being very good because you can just power farm all the camps on the map and you're still going to have that extra damage from the lethality, and it gives a bunch of haste as well. And the build path's quite nice. So it builds out a Tiamat and Brutalizer. And Brutalizer is basically just Serrated Dirk on Trent. It also gives ability haste, so it's very powerful. So I could see this item being good on Riven. It just depends on how strong the other items are. But like I said, you're not locked into a certain mythic, so you could always build this and the other items as well. And then we have the Hubris, where this item's quite interesting. When you kill an enemy champion, you're granted a statue of yourself. That's kind of cool. But then when a champion you have damaged in the last 3 seconds dies, you gain 10 AD plus 1 per statue for a minute. So this is going to be really good on champions that weave in and out of fights. They can keep fighting, they're not just locked into one burst. I could see it being good on a champ like Rengar. Of course, most Rengar tops build the Bruiser build, but they are removing Sundra, so you do need to look for more options. So this could be good on a full lethality Rengar, for example, but for the most part, yet again, not really a top lane item. And then we have Opportunity. Now, this is the assassin item I'm looking forward to the most, because if a champion dies, within 3 seconds of you damaging them, you gain an insane burst of movement speed. So this is going to feel really good on a champion like Aatrox, even a champion like Jace, where in the past you had to rely on Duskblade, which of course was really overpowered. If you got a kill, you couldn't be targeted. So this has more counterplay than that, but in my opinion, it's going to be quite fun because the problem with Duskblade is it could either be extremely high impact or not really matter, right? If you just kill someone on the front and no one's targeting you, completely useless. But if you kill the front line on Jace or Aatrox, for example, and you just get 150 movement speed out of nowhere, this item's going to feel extremely good, and also you get movement speed just in general from the item. This is going to feel quite good. And you also, the reason I think it'll be good on Jace is because if you're out of combat for 8 seconds, you have bonus lethality gain. Bonus lethality doesn't say how much, but it lasts for 3 seconds after dealing chaps. So that's one shock blast on Jace, that's all you need. I could see this item being extremely good. And then the rest of them are just what builds into it. So Rectrix, movement speed and AD, that might feel quite good on Jace early game, of course. Movement speed for lane spacing, and then Brutalizer. So I think this item will be really strong, even though it's a bit more expensive than Dirk. You also get ability haste, so that's quite nice. And then Grudge. So Grudge is pretty similar to before, except for now it doesn't always slow. It only slows slows champions when you hit them with spells and they're below half HP by 30%. So it's not as broken as it was in current league, but it's still going to be quite good if you need the armor pin. Moving on to tank items. Now this first item, Hollow Radiance, I think is a really good change. It is a Sunfire cape, but with magic resist. So if you're playing a champ like Ornn or Malphite in the past, if you're up against Gwen, Vladimir, matchups like that, if you build your Balmy Cinder, you're delaying your core item for a very long time, because you don't want to rush a straight Sunfire, build a Chain Vest in those matchups, but now you don't have to. It builds out a Spectre's Cowl, Balmy Cinder, so this item's going to feel amazing, and even killing enemy non-structures, non-wards, deals extra damage in an AoE around you, so it's going to be extremely good for wave clear, and you're also going to get MR at the same time, so I really like that change. And now we have the Unending Despair. So this item, in my opinion, makes Dr. Mundo's stocks go up by quite a lot. While in combat with enemy champs, every 7 seconds, deal magic damage nearby and heal for the damaged out. So a champion like Singed and Dr. Mundo, of course they want to be boosting into a fight with their ulti, staying stuck onto people. This item is going to feel really good. It might feel good on most tanks as well, but especially on those champs, it's very easy to stick onto somebody and get used to that damage. So, but you're going to have to get used to the timing, right? Every 7 seconds it does damage, so you have to be playing around that. You have to be very aware of it. And then we have the Kainakuruken. Definitely pronounced that wrong. But after not taking damage for 15 seconds, you gain a big magic shield, 18% of your max HP. So this is going to be really good versus poke champs. So if you're frontlining for your team, let's say you're playing Cassante, for example, and they have a heavy poke comp. They have Ziggs, they have Zoe. This will be a great item to block that damage for your team and make space for them. And now they're changing Jaksha the Protein. So now, once you have 5 stacks of Jaksha the Protein when you're in combat, you gain 25% bonus resist. So still good, just not as strong as it was before. And I like that a lot of these items you'll notice is primarily tank stats, right? You've got a big magic shield, extra resistances. So they're not trying to make tanks do, a million damage. They're just trying to make them more tanky, which I can appreciate. And then we have Dead Man's Plate. Now, the main difference of this Dead Man's Plate is that the strength of movement slowing effects is reduced by 25%. So I actually think this is going to be really good on champs like Garen, even though you can cleanse souls with your Q, it's still going to be good. Champs like Darius, who already build it, it's just going to be a bit stronger on them. Not as much for tanks unless they have a ton of slowing effects on their team. And then we have the Force of Nature. So Force of Nature, pretty similar to before, while at 8 stacks of Steadfast, gains 60 MR and 10% increased movement speed. So that's pretty insane. 60 magic resist is quite a lot, so this item's going to feel quite good versus heavy MR teams. So we'll skip the enchanter items, let's not waste our time. We're going to be diving straight into the fighter items. And the first item, Sundered Sky, is basically a replacement to Divine Sunderer. Now the problem with the passive, the first attack against a champion will critically strike for 150% damage and heal you. Now you can assume this will be really good on Gangplank, of course a guaranteed crit. The problem is they don't specify. They don't specify the cooldown. Is it 1 minute against a champ, 4 seconds? Is it the entire game? They really need to make it clear, because it's hard to say how strong the item will be without the cooldown of the passive. But if it's a similar cooldown to Divine Sunderer, then you could assume it's going to be good on Sunderer champs and also on GP. Now, as for Tiamat and Hydra, it's really good that they've regained their active, of course. The problem is right now, I've seen the current active locks you out of auto-attacking, where in the past, you could auto-attack Hydra or auto-attack Tiamat auto, and it would feel very smooth. The problem is now they made it so you're sort of locked out after auto-attacking, so it's basically only for wave clear. If you're in a fight and you pop the active and you're just standing there like a headless chicken, not going to feel great. So hopefully they fix that, but if they don't, then on a champ like Camille, you probably don't want to be looking to build this. You'd probably want to be building Titanic Hydra. But you still have to build it on Fiora. Of course, you do need the Hydra on that champ. But if they make the active so clunky as it is right now, it's going to feel quite bad. And Titanic Hydra. Now, a champion like Set is going to use this item extremely well, get extra auto in with the auto attack reset, and Camille, if Ravenous Hydra stays clunky, it could be good on her as well. And then we have the Nitro Hex Aegis. So this item, basically, the thing that stood out to me the most, the second I read this, is I knew Olaf is going to love this item. So 30 ability haste for your ultimate doesn't really matter, but after casting your ulti, gain 35% attack speed and 15 bonus movement speed for 7 seconds. That's a very long time to have your Olaf ulti, utilizing their movement speed and attack speed. That's going to feel amazing, even on a champ like Jax as well. It's going to feel great. So I'm really looking forward to this item. And then we have the Tunneler, which is just a component built into it, where it gives AD and HP. So it's just Phage without the health regen. So that's going to feel okay, similar to Phage. And then we have the Hull Breaker. Now, I really like the change they've made for Hull Breaker. They've made it so in the past you get bonus resistances if you're by yourself. But now they've increased the amount of damage you do to towers. So basic attacks grant a stack up to 5, attacking an enemy champion or epic monster, while a max stacks consumes all stacks to deal 150% bonus AD damage. So that's pretty good, for a 1v1. But it increased to 400% against structures. So I really like what they've done, because the way Hullbreaker should be, in my opinion, is it's an item that allows you to do your job on the side, allows you to split push, allows you to get structures. The problem with the old Hullbreaker is you basically just built it so you could play by yourself, 1v3, 1v2, the enemy top jungle. It was a lot less skillful, but now there's skill to it, because you're not going to be tankier from building this item, of course, apart from the HP. So if you disrespect the enemy jungle or support, if you're not tracking them, you're going to get punished, but also if you track them very well, you're going to get rewarded, because if you attack the tower at a timer where you can't get ganked, you're going to get rewarded more by doing a lot more damage. So I really like this change. They've made it a lot more skill intensive. And then we have the Stride Breaker. Now, something that's really interesting about the new Stride Breaker, very similar active, the AoE radius has slows, but if you read it, you gain 25% bonus movement speed per champion hit. So that's pretty insane. If you get a 3 or a 4-man active on a champ like Garen or Olaf, you're going to get a massive burst of movement speed. So that's going to be quite fun. So it's going to be really, really strong on those champs, even on a champ like Set as well, quite good. And now we have the Wit's End. Now the main difference is they've added tenacity to Wit's End. So this is going to feel really good on champions like Yone, where on Yone you're basically locked into building Berserker Greaves, but now you still have an option where you can also get MR, tenacity, and attack speed, everything you want on that champion. You can also, when you need the tenacity, right? So this item will feel really good on a champ like Yone. He's going to be really strong with it. And then we have the Spear of Shojin. So pretty similar. Your non-ultimate spells gain 15 haste, and then we have the Focus Will. Now, your spells hits grant up to 3. Spells deal 3% increased damage per stack, so about 9% increased damage for your spells. So this is going to feel really good on a champion like Jax, of course, very low cooldown spells. It's going to feel really good on him, similar to before. And then we just have these Phage and Sigil, where initially, when I saw Steel Sigil, I thought Longsword, Cloth Armor, AD and Armor, this item's going to be broken, but if you actually control effort, Steel Sigil, you'll see it just builds into Guardian Angel, so a lot of top laners that would utilize this really well. I assumed, oh, you might be able to buy this on Olaf early game. If you're versus a champion like Riven, it could feel quite good, but you're locked into building GA, so it's not going to be as good as I expected when I first read it. Now, something you should notice from all of these items is they've basically removed ability haste from the majority of them. So I see what they're trying to do. They're replacing ability haste with movement speed. So initially when I read this, I thought that was going to feel quite bad, right? Having long cooldowns on your Renekton, on your Olaf, going to feel horrible. But I realized you can still get ability haste from other items, but I feel like this rewards you for better spell usage now, because you're going to be a lot more mobile. A lot of these items give, a bit of extra movement speed. Stride Breaker, of course, you get more. So a lot of these items give you extra movement speed at the cost of not having the ability haste that you had in the past, where every item you build on the season gives you ability haste, basically, until they removed it from some of them, Death Stance. But for the most part now, it's going to be pretty hard to get haste, so you have to be very good with your spell usage. So it might feel pretty bad at first to get used to, but I feel like if you are really good at using your spells, it's going to separate you from the other top lane. Alright guys, I'm going to call it there, and personally I am a big fan of these changes. I cannot wait for the next season, especially getting stuck in with the boys at 5 minutes at these grub fights. And as for the champions, I'm looking forward to playing the most. It's got to be Vladimir. I feel like these changes benefit him a lot, and I really miss playing him this year. He's one of my favorite champs. And also Olaf, where I will miss having a bunch of free ability haste, don't get me wrong, but having insane amounts of movement speed is going to be very fun. So, yep, I'm going to call the video there, and I'll see you guys next time.